Well, hello and welcome back to the studio. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. We are here taking on a major topic. Everybody has it on their lips, which is generative AI and how to deploy it. Even as we say this, we've seen some recent fails as people have unleashed chatbots who then slag off the company or aren't readily controlled or living up to brand values. So it's a hot topic. We all want to play, we see the value, but also there are some challenges to release it under our own brands. So, having made this big promise about covering the 5 steps, I'm really pleased to have in the studio Oliver Lennon from Syndio, who, as an expert, can take us through it. So it's not entirely up to me. Oliver, why don't you tell everyone a bit about you, your role, and about Syndio, and then we can get into activities. So welcome to the studio, Oliver. Do introduce yourself.
Ian, thank you. Great to join you and great to be with you. Yes, it is a topic that's seemed to be in everybody's lips the last 12 months. As you said, my background, my name is Oliver Lennon. I am CEO here at a company called Jindal. So we are a conversational AI solution specialist, working on with a number of global customers around delivering, I suppose, customer experience for all parts of the customer journey. So we focus right through from marketing, sales, and service. And a lot of that is underpinned by AI. And I'll touch on some of this as I go through the discussion, I'm sure, Ian, but not everything requires absolute AI from a generative perspective. That certainly is becoming much more common. In terms of the company itself, we've been around for a few years, but the team that's been working with me, we've been working on CX, AI solutions, believe it or not, back from 2004, 2005, when we worked with companies like eBay, Dixon's, Comet Group. If anybody in the UK remembers those, they're now long gone, but we're a high street retailer at one stage, right through to the present day where we're working with the likes of HP and one of the largest global furniture retailers. We're actually working with them at the moment as well. But yes, back from the mid 2000s, when we were putting in speech recognition technology underpinned by AI into some of these, say, large retailers, it's what we've been doing now for quite a few years.
So just tell us how it's changed then, because I'm old enough to remember how each decade has its own approach to conversational commerce, and the technology has ranged from basic workflow to now unfathomable AI. But from a consumer perspective, the interfaces are roughly similar. Is voice or text, there's an interaction, you say, I say, we get an answer. With that benefit of 2 decades of experience, as we come back into talking about conversational commerce, this time AI powered, what are the big changes? If you look back to the noughties, you compare now, what's really changed?
Well, obviously in the last, 12 or 15 months since the launch of ChatGPT, there's been quite a lot of talk in the market about conversational AI, but AI has been around, as you rightly say, for decades. I'm not going to go back to, I think, 1956 it was, in the Dartmouth conference around AI. But I suppose to answer the question, what has changed? We've moved more really not since ChatGPT, but I think of 2017, Google launched a technology based on what's called a transformer architecture. That has hit the headlines more with OpenAI and ChatGPT. But that has allowed, I suppose, companies like ourselves to start to leverage this technology to move away from a very structured NLU or NLP, natural language processing base, which is really the traditional model for using AI in customer experience, customer service solutions, which is very much design driven. So you design the inputs and the prompts or the responses are pretty static, and there's a lot of data that you have to do in terms of the intents. What has changed more recently in the last, as I said, 12 to 15 months has been the advent of large language models. and generative AI, and that has opened up I suppose it has allowed the industry to be more flexible in terms of how we start deploying these solutions, in terms of the conversational interface, because it's not a rules-based system, whereas the traditional AI would have been much more rules-based, as in you had predefined responses based on the intent that you were trying to match in terms of what the user either said or inputted. So that has certainly changed, but I guess what hasn't changed is the requirement for data, the requirement to integrate your systems, and that's been the same as it was 20 to 30 years ago. I definitely think that is still a key part to developing and deploying these solutions.
Yes. And again, I think early adopters amongst us would have been familiar with the rules-based. And of course, as consumers, we're totally au fait because the conversation normally goes, hello, my name is something silly. I'm your 24-hour bot. Ask me any question. And whatever question you ask, the answer is, oh, I have to put you forward to an agent and they're not here now. So would you like a download? So we're used to the sort of highs and lows of that. But at the same time, we're now talking to our phones, our smart speakers. Everybody has had access to playing with, ChatGPT, Claude, manipulating images. So we're in this world where we have professional experience from some years, we have consumer experience where the world seems to be changing. And when we were talking in preparation for this, one of the things that excited me was a 5-step plan that you'd been working on that, in a way, helped bridge that gap between everybody rushing and having a play with having something that is commercially viable and deployable. So I thought today, if you don't mind, we could maybe step through aspects of that. So I was going to throw up a slide you kindly shared earlier on. So let's maybe just cover the 5 steps. Then we'll go through them roughly in order, but we'll pick up interesting things along the way. So maybe just talk us very quickly through the 5, and then we'll start back at 1.
And you're right. And one of the reasons, I guess, and one of the prime reasons we come up with this approach is, I suppose, the number of times when I personally and the team engage with customers, and the first question they've always asked is, how do we go about starting on the AI journey? And because it's, as you say, the prevalence from a consumer perspective around the likes of ChatGPT has made that very, I suppose, the visibility within the consumer market, and therefore it's put pressure on organizations to be AI-led or AI-enabled. So we come up with a 5-step process, which is really helping you in a structured manner, helping organizations. And we've deployed this, and we're working through this with a number of organizations in the retail space as well as other industries to help them, I suppose, get on that journey, because it's good to be talking about AI, but you do have to act, you do have to be on the journey. And it's not about trying to do everything in one fell swoop. So we've devised a 5-step plan. And again, if I start with each one of those steps, they're not necessarily linear, but it's about getting off the block, so to speak, and starting the process right through from what we call our innovation hub. And again, retailers are used to working with innovation hubs. I think I've seen something from Marks and Spencer's a couple of years ago where they had their innovation hub for their food line of business. So the innovation hub as the first step, right through to getting, as the final step or the 5th step, getting it into production. And while that sounds like a lot of steps, perhaps it actually should be a very short, sharp, iterative process, picking the right I suppose, use cases as you go through this. So starting with step 1, if you want, Ian, it's about establishing that innovation hub. And again, this, while it sounds like a very grandiose term in terms of putting an innovation hub in place within your organization, particularly if you're a smaller organization, it doesn't have to be that, but it's about thinking in an innovative manner. It's about, I guess, getting a cross-section of people from within your organization involved. It's about setting what we would call your North Star. So where do you want to go with this? And ideally, you also tie that to your corporate strategy. So how does this fit into your corporate strategy? Because again, whenever I'm asked about AI and organizations saying we want to be using AI, one of the first questions I will always ask is, well, why? Why do you want to be using AI? How does it fit with your strategy? So I think establishing that innovation hub, setting that North Star, tying it to the overall corporate strategy, or maybe if it's a larger organization, if it's a strategy within a particular business unit, are the important facets. But importantly, it's about getting, I suppose, a team, and it's allowing that team to start to act in a startup manner, in an agile way, and trying out different things. But importantly, whenever you set that innovation hub up, it's about assigning time and resource to actually do something and put some guidance around it. So to me, that's the critical first step of doing it.
And what happens in organizations where you're not maybe big enough to have a director of innovation or an innovation team, but equally you have a lot of innovative people? So every CMO I meet is innovating left, right, and center. They're trialing things here and there. IT, digital directors, e-com directors, everyone is innovating. So when something like AI comes along, I can imagine a board meeting where everybody's got their famous what about, what if, we could do, etc., etc. So I think, if you've got emergent desire to innovate, how or what is your view on bringing some form of coherence to that so that people can move forward? Or do you think it's a case of you can have multiple mini hubs? What's your approach to that?
I mean, you certainly, and where I've seen it with one large customer, while it was all grouped together as one innovation hub, I think they had seven different teams from across different facets of the business looking at how they could leverage this technology. So I think the critical thing here is, yes, the senior leadership board, whomever, should be there to help set the direction, but that's kind of when they need to step back and, as I say, set that North Star. But then you need to incorporate people from different parts of the organization, both technologists as well as people who understand the markets, who understand what you're trying to sell, who understand your customers, and bring those into, again, it's about, when I say teams, these are small teams, like these should be 4 or 5 people working in an agile manner that are churning stuff out pretty quickly. But I think it's important to get that cross representation. And yes, I suppose the innovation hub can be used as a glue, if you will, to actually, particularly in something like generative AI, where it's changing rapidly. Because there are, again, I've seen other benefits out of it rather than just the showcases that you generate, but it starts to create an understanding of what AI is, what it means for our organization, for example. And it's a very collaborative and learning approach as well. And that's a critical part of it. So it's not just about mandating, it's about, again, because I say this technology has been changing so rapidly in the last 12 to 18 months, you could literally sit and read and learn all day. So I think that collaboration and learning is an extremely important, and almost like a spin-off of this type of approach, for example.
And you did mention speed. And so, as we look at maybe the second step, it's quite a small time difference between step 1 and 2, which is moving from let's innovate to let's get our hands on something that we can show and share. So how do we move then from the discussions to having a proof of concept? And what's the qualification for a proof of concept rather than just a, hey, look, I saw this on Instagram, isn't this cool? That's a show. What's a proof of concept?
So again, in this space, what I've seen working is taking the technology and building something. And again, where I've seen it work well, this works over maybe 2 or 3 sprints. So normally a sprint, and we don't get too technical in the development world, is maybe 3 or 4 weeks. So working over that relatively short space of time, either using commercial off-the-shelf technology, adapting that technology for your own business needs, or which could be a combination of both, building your own technology to incorporate into that. So the proof of concept, it's not the final product. You're not trying to cover every edge case. You're just trying to show how, maybe using from a technical perspective, different data sets that you have within your organization, how you could integrate those into using APIs onto something like Vertex AI or OpenAI or Gemini, whatever underlying generative AI technology you want to use. But I think the key thing is to try and focus on ideation and speed. And I said, this is not about building, a final product that's going to cover every edge case, that's going to, cover every facet of your business. It's about picking, again, a couple of use cases. And part of that initiation of your innovation hub, you might have an awful long list of, 20, 30, 40, 50 different use cases that you think could be adopted. Part of this process then is about constantly paring those back. So by the time you get to this stage, you said you might be down to 4 or 5, depending on the size of the organization, 4 or 5 use cases that you're going to actually start to build something tangible that can be demonstrated, and that you can, again, if you're in your organization, you want to get budget sign off for this, you want to get your senior leadership to move, you have to show something tangible. You have to be able to demonstrably showcase what I would call them in terms of this is what it does, this is what it does for real, this is how it actually operates. But again, it's a very thin slice if you want through the technology that you're trying to deliver at this stage.
So with that speed of movement, I'm loving that, but I'm also feeling worried as well. So if I worked for a large retailer and we're running a little project, we've got a couple of our favorite ones, and then I scamper down the hallway or get on a call with our CIO and say, I'd really like to get access to these data sets to have a little play. And 3 minutes later, the data police are at my office, I'm cuffed, I've breached GDPR, I've accidentally broken the company data handling policy. I'm working with unapproved partners. Any words of wisdom, or where you've seen things working, where I can have little projects that don't get squashed by the necessary realities of data management, corporate processes, gatekeepers, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the dangers to this type of approach, is that it gets, for want of a better word, squashed by the corporate policy machine.
Who we love, I hasten to add.
Who we love, of course we love.
No letters, please.
And they keep us right in many ways. But for sure, using things like published APIs, that maybe you already have an app or you have a website, certainly steering at this stage of a proof of concept, steering away from PII, personal data, basically. And again, remember, you're not putting this out into the wild. This is not public facing at this stage. A proof of concept is really simply to demonstrate that you can build something which looks like it will drive value. Again, at this stage, you don't know that the concept will drive value, but you think you can take the technology, you can integrate it in a certain way, you can use a certain data set, and you believe that it actually is going to drive value. As you go through the process, and you're looking to see, well, what is that value? How do I measure it? What are the KPIs, etc.? But that slightly comes later in the process. But the advice again is to, stay away from the obvious things, like don't use personal data, don't be using real live customer data. Use published APIs, and again, most organizations will have test data sets, test data schemas, etc., so that you're not actually delving into using real live customer data, and therefore the risk of corrupting or doing something nefarious to that data is a problematic. So again, that's part of your overall process.
I can feel all the CIOs heaving a sigh. They're still looking at us suspiciously, but somewhat mollified. One of the examples we were talking about, let's just jump to some real life stuff now, is we were looking at IKEA, mainly because I mentioned them in our conversation as a long-standing pioneer. So I'm sure that the Gen Xers amongst our listeners would remember. I think it was Anna. Was it Anna? Was one of the first iterations?
Yes,
and
it was indeed.
I love that, because you could achieve things that saved you going to IKEA, which is obviously a high divorce risk activity for most people. But they've gone and upped the ante recently with a number of additional capabilities. So I've forgotten what this is called. It's not Anna Plus, is it? It's got a new
No,
name.
they launched a couple of years ago their next generation, for want of a better word, Anna, which is called Billy, which I think is after one of
Billy,
their
that's it, yes.
more famous bookcases. And I think again, I come across something last year or maybe the year before of how they were using the technology. And this is not generative AI, but this again is AI technology they were using as part of the Billy chatbot to really free up agents so that their agents or their co-workers, I think as IKEA referred to them as, were free to help with other added value services. But one of the things, again, I've recently picked up in the last actually couple of weeks, they've launched a GPT plugin. So again, that's a piece of technology that sits within OpenAI ChatGPT and allows you to start to, in real time, query, have a conversation with IKEA. So I think it's only available in the US at this point in time, and I think their plans are to roll that out globally, as I understand. But again, that's interesting from a perspective that, you know, this is like GPT, although I think they're now calling it the market space, or OpenAI have moved it into what they're calling the market space. So it's kind of starting to become like the iPhone, perhaps back in 2007 when it first launched, and then after that, you had the app marketplace and you had a whole series of applications launching on the marketplace. So what IKEA have done here is they've launched on that marketplace, which opens up it opened up their customer base in many regards, who can now interface with IKEA. So you don't have to go to the IKEA app, or you don't have to go to the IKEA website, or you don't have to be in one of their stores. So again, it's an interesting take I found in terms of what they're doing, which is trying to, I guess, grow their market share by, you know, it's the old adage, if you're in sales, fish where the fish are, you know. So if this is where consumers maybe are, if they're going to OpenAI, to ChatGPT, and if there's an IKEA plugin, if it's deeply integrated into the IKEA data and the tone of voice, etc., which is what I believe IKEA have done, then it's a smart move, because as I said, it's and this is not about for them. This, I assume, in this instance, wasn't about, you know, cost reduction, but this is around increasing market share, getting them to another segment of customers who may be using this technology or run this marketplace and who can interface directly with IKEA. So again, it's quite innovative, and that leave alone the technology itself.
It's interesting that you know, one of the developments and the democratization of access to AI, especially Gen AI models, is that you don't always have to do things yourself. So Claude, one of the more recent Gen AI engines, one of the use cases it's been demonstrating is you upload an IKEA instruction leaflet on how to build something, and it will then look at the images and it will turn the images into written and spoken step-by-step instructions, along with top tips of how to do things along the way. And so even though IKEA themselves, as far as I know, didn't do that, the impact for them is it may change the way that they put out instructions, for example, or start incorporating other people's innovation. So it is a fascinating time for people who own data and, you know, own that intellectual property to be using it in order to build their brand and consumer engagement.
Absolutely. I mean, it is definitely, as I said, it's expanding their marketplace, and this is not just about traditionally customer service. This is about all stages of that journey, you know, from helping you buy products, understand products, and I think this is important as part of these steps when you're going through thinking about it. Just don't think about service. Think about where else you can focus it on. Think about, you know, we would talk about the customer journey. So how does a customer engage with you right from the point of when you're marketing to them, to you sell to them, and then after you sell the service, and then hopefully from your perspective, the renewal of that product or service again, which continues in a or should continue in a virtuous circle. So, you know, think about it.
I'm just going to pause you there, though, because in a way you're saying something quite radical there, because when people introduce software tools, the conversational commerce bit has mainly been, the business case has been cost reduction. which is if you give us X pounds for our lovely software, we will save you Y pounds in X, Y, and Z. Therefore, feel happy about giving us money. So when we started this conversation, we could have gone down the route of saying, oh, it's going to be a tool for efficiency, blah, blah, blah. But you're being, in a way, more challenging, saying, don't just cut a few costs or do a bit of improvement. Very much look at building new capabilities.
Absolutely, and clearly for the accountants among us, the measurement of cost and return on investment can be quite easy when you use some sort of technology such as AI to reduce costs. It's relatively easy to count. But as I said at the outset, I've been doing this for too long, 20 plus years, and the holy grail has always been how do you, yes, manage operational costs, but improve customer experience, and increase your revenues and your market share. I think this technology has the opportunity, and again, you asked me what has changed. Certainly, this is one of the things I see it hasn't changed yet, but it has the potential to change, to use generative AI technology, not just for those cost reduction, but to increase your revenues, to help reach different market segments, to grow market share, to help in the sales cycle. And I think at last, the technology now, not just with LLMs and GenAI, but all of the plumbing and frameworks that you can put around that, is, I believe, over the next number of years, going to help us deliver that for customers. And I think, it's critical. Sorry, go ahead, Ian.
No, I was saying, you've sort of moved us on to the measurement side and success metrics. We've done accountancy and metrics in under a minute. But it's interesting here how you have the higher value service, increased revenue, and reducing workload. But it's interesting that you say at the first point, which is move from the proof to a measurable pilot. So once you've got this demonstration up and running, it sounds like putting a number on it is an important thing to do again quickly.
Yes, I think that's important. The step 3, I think we're step 2 when we're defining the proof of concept. As you get through these stages, that you'll refine, you'll drop use cases out. But when you get to this stage, you're looking to say, right, it looks like for these 2 areas or this one area, you may only just end up with one use case. The proof of concept seems to be valid. Technology seems to work. I want to think about, okay, what does that mean in tangible value for us? Does it, all of those things, does it increase our revenue, grow market share? Can we reduce costs? And I think at that stage, or this stage, you'll be thinking about this the whole way throughout, no doubt, but certainly start to put metrics on that so we can then, again, do something like decide to roll it out for a pilot. So at this stage, you are going to put it in front of, maybe it's not customers, maybe it's internal users, maybe it is customers in a controlled way. So yes, you have to then have your IT team, your corporate data teams, etc., on board to make sure that obviously any concerns they may have are also being addressed. But you certainly, key for me is you're defining your success criteria here, and you're going to pilot this, and perhaps it's for 3 weeks, for 3 months, or something like that. Again, it's a relatively short period of time, and you want to be fairly clear. While you may have proved the concept and the technology, you might run the pilot, you might say, well, we just can't prove the benefit. We're not increasing sales, we're not reducing, whatever. And we've decided not to continue. So again, at each stage, you're making decisions. And it's kind of like an arbitrary, these cut-offs at every stage or every step of the process. But you're not trying to design that all up front. You're continuing to evolve. And I think as you get through these steps, as I said at the outset, one of the key things you're learning the whole time, you're sharing knowledge, you're getting a culture into your organization about what we want to do, how we want to innovate, how we want to use this technology, GenAI. And regardless of what the technology is, whatever the next things that come along, again, this is the type of process you'll reuse over and over again, in my belief, you will, anyway.
Yeah. Well, look, one company that is always testing non-stop is Amazon, and you've picked out an example here, Oliver. Do you want to just talk us through why this one made the cut for you?
Yeah, and again, Amazon, I think last year towards the end, I think it's in the US app, this ability to use generative AI to summarize customer reviews. I think there was a stat from Gartner last year, or there was a survey they carried out in the US, and over 51% of customers who took part in that survey said reviews shape their buying habits. So that to me was a very natural way of going, well, if consumers are buying based on reviews, and we've all seen review sites, particularly on Amazon, where there's thousands of reviews in a product, you're not going to read all of those reviews. But I think one of the benefits that generative AI, and it's not only Amazon, company called Newegg are also doing this for some of their products. They're an online retailer from an electronic goods perspective, are starting to use generative AI to summarize. So if you can take 100 reviews or 1,000 reviews and summarize that into one paragraph, obviously from the organization perspective, you probably want to make sure that it's maybe only picking out favorable reviews or reviews that are 4 stars or more, or whatever it happens to be your criteria. But summarizing that and giving the customer the confidence in terms of part of their buying cycle is extremely important. And again, this is where you start to see this technology being used at all stages of the customer journey and not just for cost reduction. So to me, this is a really brilliant example of actually using generative AI to help in that buying. It doesn't necessarily mean that the deal or that the basket can be complete, but it certainly is one of those stages that helps through that buying cycle and that buying process.
It's also a relatively conservative one. So compared to, create me 5,000 images and a movie of this boring product in multiple locations and 27 languages, theoretically possible, high risk, lots of checking. One of the things GenAI has proven it does incredibly well is aggregation, summary, précis. So again, this isn't maybe the most demanding, high risk release. It's not like, say, DPD and their chatbot allowing it to become a sentient being and reflect on their business. This is a much more constrained thing. So let's maybe just move on then to your number 5, which is the rollout. So we've got the learnings. Everyone likes it. We've met the metrics. Happy days, surely.
Well, it can be. It depends how you go about it. But I think you can't get to step 5, and I know this sounds logical, unless you've done the other 4 steps. And I think if you follow the other 4 steps, you'll either have finished your project before you get to here because it hasn't been a success for whatever reason. The proof of concept didn't work, the pilot didn't work, etc. But if you get to step 5, the pilot has worked, as you say, then you want to think about rolling out. And I think the critical thing, and again, while I'm showing these steps as linear, the reality is throughout this process, and this might be running for a 3 to 6 month period while you're doing this, you're always thinking about, the rollout. Should it be successful? How would we roll out? But it's critically important you start to integrate that with your existing stack. This shouldn't be about, we're going to introduce a new technology, GenAI, and we're going to throw away all the other things we've done. For example, our chatbots on our website or whatever. We're going to stop all of those because this new technology. That's not the approach. The approach is to how can then we leverage this technology within the existing infrastructure that we have in place, because otherwise those KPIs that you maybe set in step 4 around either cost reduction or value generation, if you have to rewrite a whole, and particularly if it's a large organization or an enterprise level, if you have to rewrite or redo a whole data architecture, a whole infrastructure, how you deliver digital services or stuff on your website or through your apps, then that business case very, very quickly would dwarf, or the investment required to deliver that would dwarf anything perhaps you're delivering out of GenAI. So I think the critical thing here is ensuring you incorporate that into, and again, this shouldn't be a black box, because the one thing you can be guaranteed is this technology will change, this technology will evolve. And if this is written as some sort of black box, only a very few people know what to do with it, you can guarantee in 6 or 12 months it'll start to become obsolete. Because those people have moved on, you would have taken the advantage of it. So I think this is critical to the deployment.
About black boxes, I think it's now law in Europe that no one can sell software without claiming there's some AI in it somewhere, or there was touched by AI or something. Plus, you've got multiple LLM models. You've got different ways of accessing AI. You'd have the internal efficiency, the talking to others, the deploying. So as you have an innovation approach where someone might say, oh, I'm using GPT 3.5. The other one says, oh, I'm running an LLM on my own computer with my own training data. There'll be lots of things that have been generated and productized, but aren't really talking to each other. So as things mature, how do you see all of these different strands of innovation that are moving at different speeds, with different scopes, different focus? How from a board level do we get some level of coherence on this? Or is it just a new fact of life, like everybody has a copy of Excel and they do with it what they wish? Where do you see it maturing beyond this initial experimentation phase?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you call it experimentation, I think that's going to continue because things are changing, as you say, from different models to different vendors to open source models. And I think that innovation at that level is going to continue to evolve. So I don't think from a board level, I think you have to be prepared to realize decisions you might make now in 6 months might be semi-obsolete. But again, this is back to that final step, is the importance of actually building your framework. And I would say then as well as the importance of putting your policies without getting policy heavy and procedures around it. So, things like, and it's come back, I'm sure my age come back when we were building voice interfaces, the tone of voice is still critical. So what does this mean for you as now? What is so again, structuring those, the enabling technology should allow you to deliver those. But as a board or a senior leadership, you want to be putting those policy frameworks around how you want to use and not necessarily get tied into, oh, it must be technology X or Y, or it must be model A or B, because again, the models absolutely are changing literally daily. So I don't think you should tie yourself into that.
Okay, well, look, one of the things we discussed was how our lovely subscribers demand some numbers. So we've talked in principle, we've talked in terms of approach, but you have a case study where we can't mention the client, sadly, but it is a global furniture retailer. We let people work that out. But they've put in your AI assistant, and just talk us through some of the results there, and to what extent this was so obvious it's hardly bears talking about, or so amazing you're skipping around. So just help us understand where the success is.
Yeah, so this is about, I think we deployed over a year ago one of our retail experience apps. So we have a number of line of business applications for different industries. So obviously for a retailer, this is the experience app for retail. Really focused on a couple of key metrics that they had, which was customer experience. So keeping that increased or as high as possible while reducing or delivering operational efficiencies. And I'm glad on that level, you can see the stats there. So again, as customers who use the technology, as their survey post usage, again, there's a 91% customer satisfaction rating again, which is pretty high. And again, to me, this makes sense in automation if you do it right. And the analogy I've often used in this world is the ATM, which is a piece of automation. Oh, okay, it's not AI, but it's an automation that allows you to get cash out of your bank. Again, because it's implemented, it's simple, it does what it says in the tin. Again, ATMs are widely accepted and have a very good customer service rating typically. But like every solution that you implement, there has to be a return on investment. So typically in this industry, and I still think the drivers are still there, is around containment. So again, achieving over 50%, I think it's 51% containment is critical, because that drives your operational efficiencies. Not necessarily that you reduce those costs, but you can say deploy those people or costs in other ways to actually deliver higher value services. And again, I think the approach we've taken is very much a rapid iterative approach using our own framework. So speed of deployment, because every week that you lose in terms of implementing something like this does materially impact the return on investment. So again, that migration took place in just under 3 months. So again, it was about rapidly getting that out to market, getting markets on it, getting helping realize the benefits much quicker than they traditionally would be, because sometimes these systems take years and years to implement.
Excellent. Well, look, Thank you for that, Oliver. We have, in our time, romped through the steps with a couple of great examples and an ROI case. And in case anybody is thinking, oh, I'd like to spend a bit more time working through that on my own, then we do have here a link for a discovery workshop. So youngsters amongst you can scan the QR code, and if we go back to the boomers and Gen X, you can write a letter to Syndeo in order to pick up on that. But for now, our time is up, Oliver. So thank you for taking us through the steps, illustrating them so nicely, balancing, if you like, the idea of pace with flexibility and the fact that these stages often overlap. And it's been a great pleasure chatting to you. So firstly, big thank you to you, and also a thank you to those of you who tuned in. You will, of course, get a copy of Oliver's deck, which we will mail to you with the post-webinar follow-up. And if you have any questions, then, of course, do let us know. research@retailx.net will get through to the team, and we'd be very happy to answer any questions there. But until we see you in the studio next time, thanks from me. Thank you, Oliver,
Ian.
and happy trading to everyone else.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Ian.